Hey guys, it's James Walsh here from the Wrestling Epicenter. I'd like to thank you for finding us here on YouTube. If you get the opportunity, please click that subscribe button as well as the notifications bell. This way, anytime that we upload any new content or new to you content from our archives dating back to 2002, you'll be notified. You can check out what we're up to. Please also check out www.wrestlingepicenter.com for all your wrestling news and information needs, as well as check out our store to keep us running free and clear. Without any further delay, let's get to why you're here. Thanks for checking out Wrestling Epicenter on YouTube. So I've acquired quite an eclectic group of interviews over the years by accident, and by taking advantage of opportunities that presented themselves to me. And this is one of them. As I record this in early 2021, I'm reflecting back on our archives, and I'm uploading all of our archives little by little. This interview is with Rita Cosby, who used to be a Fox News and MSNBC correspondent. I'm not sure what she's up to now, but she was famously the one who did the pretty emotional Eddie Guerrero Memorial Roundtable that aired on cable news. And just a couple years after Eddie's passing, in fact, just after the Chris Benoit tragedy, we had her on the phone at work. At the time, I was a representative for 1-800-Flowers in my day job, and she called in. I recognized her voice right away because it's like this. Very distinct voice. And I immediately was like, well, listen, I do a wrestling talk show. You did the Eddie Guerrero Tribute show. Would you like to do an interview with my website? And so gracious, because she had no intention of being asked to do an interview when she was calling to order flowers for whatever the occasion was. We ended up doing an interview, and I think it was pretty damn cool to have had her perspective on things. You can tell she's not the hugest wrestling fan. She calls Big Show Big Stuff more than once, as a matter of fact. But it's a pretty good interview. I think you guys are going to like it. That's the story behind this one. Yeah, total happenstance, total accident that it ended up happening, but I'm glad that it did, and I'm still grateful for having had that opportunity. Enjoy.
Back to Our Slam Wrestling and the moment you've all been waiting for. My super secret special guest, Rita Cosby. Rita, how are you tonight?
Oh, what a setup. I have to deliver after that one. My gosh, it's great to be with you guys.
And we're just really happy to have you on here. I mean, you're such an accomplished journalist, and, you know, you've done so much to bring the world of wrestling into the forefront of mainstream media that I think everybody owes you a big thank you for that.
Well, you know what? I really became a big WWE fan. I mean, I became an instant admirer of these guys when I got to see them in action, especially when you're in the war zone with these guys and you're concerned about your safety and concerned about their safety. You really see how people truly are, not just for the cameras, but how they are off camera. And I was so impressed with the men and the women of the WWE. And now every time I see them, I'm, oh, they're so-and-so, they're so-and-so. And it gave me a chance to see another side of them.
Now, how did that transpire? How were you picked to go on that overseas trip with the WWE?
Well, I've done a number of war zone assignments before. I was in Kosovo. I've done, stories in the Middle East. And my boss at the time, then MSNBC president Rick Kaplan, came into me and he said, how would you like to go over to Afghanistan? And I thought, boy, it's still a hot spot. I've done so many stories on Afghanistan as a journalist. I think, we have a responsibility to also be able to go over there and see it. And while I'm talking about it from over here, thousands of miles away, it'd be great to be over there and get a real true perspective from the ground of what's happening. And if I go over with the military, I feel like I'm well protected and as best as you can be in a situation like that. And then at the end of the conversation, he said to me, and by the way, if you do this, you're going to go with the WWE. And I looked at him and said, wait, WWE, I just heard Warzone. And he said, that's right. And he said, I've been talking to some people and we've been offered to go. And if we want to send someone, we would love to see if you would want to do it and to go with the WWE and go with these super wrestlers. And he said, you're going to be impressed with them. He said, in his experience, he was already a wrestling fan. And he said, these guys, from what I hear, they go to these, remote forward operating bases, not just big bases where there's tons of security, but these bases where a lot of men and women who are on the front line never get visited because it's so dangerous and so risky. But because these wrestlers are quite gutsy, some of them have military backgrounds, and feel such a dedication to men and women in the U.S. military, they go to these hot spots. And I thought, what am I going to do? This could be really fun. This could be an interesting contrast. And I had gone to only one wrestling match before that, actually, because a friend of mine is actually married to JBL.
Huh?
And I remember going to the match and seeing, some punches and jumps and all that stuff and thinking, oh, God, that ketchup on their face looks really interesting. And they really stage it well. And she looked at me and said, no, that's not ketchup. JBL is bleeding. Like, that's real. And it made me go, oh, maybe it's not as fake as sort of people surmise and the impression that I think a lot of people had. And then when I got to see these guys in action, first going to a wrestling match in Columbia, South Carolina, and then we flew from South Carolina first to Germany, and then we went over to Afghanistan. And I got to see these guys in action, wrestling, just the athleticism that they have to have, and just the amazing physiques and great shape they have to be in, and dedication physically. But also, I got to see another side of them too, just what amazing human beings they are. I mean, we on route to Afghanistan, it's obviously a long flight. We took a C-130, and those are not comfortable planes. It's not like, luxurious by any means. Those stuff are strapped in. Some of them were sleeping on top of pallets. Big stuff, couldn't fit in one of the seats. I think he took like 3 or 4 seats himself just to fit in, which JBL and everybody was making fun of him while he was snoring on the plane. I'll never forget that. But we get over to Landstuhl, and this is where, the wounded soldiers are. These are the guys who literally, when they have been wounded in Iraq or somewhere else or Afghanistan or whatever, they rush to Landstuhl before they come to Walter Reed or somewhere in the States. And to see, these guys, who have been, wounded seriously, but to see their faces when they got to see some of their favorite wrestling stars walk in the door. And these guys weren't doing it for the cameras. They didn't care if we took a picture or not. They just were hugging these soldiers and signing every autograph they could and taking every picture they could and just were really class acts. And you could tell these were folks who were really appreciative of what our services are doing every day on the front lines in the war on terror.
Did you hear about what happened the last trip? I'm not sure if you were there or not. This past Christmas when they went over to Iraq?
I did not. I heard that there were some problems, though.
Oh, yeah. They got fired upon, and the soldiers gave the WWE guys some weapons, and they went out into the fields.
Wow. Well, I know that when we were in Bagram, I think it was the day before, that morning when we arrived in Bagram, Afghanistan, they first told me, in my case, they said, you can't report that you're in country when we're coming in country. We want you to keep it really secretive. And they decided at what point we could actually go live and report where we were. And we were very controlled as to sort of what locations for security reasons. But they had told us that there had been some shootings and some people actually killed, I think, right outside the base, some insurgents who were trying to get into the base that day or a few days before. So I knew that it was volatile, but I had no idea that in Iraq. I'm not surprised. And from what I saw with these guys, they were fearless. I mean, I'll never forget, I went on a chopper ride, and I was with Big Stuff, and Sheldon, and a number of others, and I remember when we got there, we go to this, first we land in Bagram, we've been flying, through the night, then we hopped on this tiny, a Black Hawk, for about an hour or so to a very, very remote base, and we're in the middle of no man's land, and when I tell you no man's land, I mean, there is nothing for miles upon miles upon miles. And so much security with us from the U.S. military because, all it takes is one rocket launcher to hit our chopper as we're going. So you could just imagine the amount of security that was around us, And we land there, and we're in the middle of, God knows where, totally vacant, no, as much security as you can imagine, but you're still so vulnerable if there's some, surprise insurgent attack. You are totally vulnerable. And these guys never mention that. They never mention how concerned they were for their safety. I asked them that too. I said, were you right? Because, sort of almost hitting death at some point. And they said, no, you know what? We're here to see these guys, and we have to show that we care about them. We have to send the message from America that we support you. And if we don't come out there, what does that say to them? And I thought it was really, and it truly was that way. You could tell that they were so happy to be a part and say thank you. And I just remember some of these young boys in one of the stations when we pulled up, they were just crying. and just trying to push the truck out of big stuff, as you can imagine. Here's this massive man, 500 pounds, huge as you guys, pulling up. And then when Vince McMahon got off the chopper behind us, you would have thought God arrived in the country, But it was just an amazing sight to see these boys. And when we left them, I just remember all of us, on the flight back and saw all of us, alumni members, because we felt bad to leave them there. Because many of them said they hadn't seen visitors in months, years. Some of those bases haven't had visitors, outside of military folks in God knows how long. And, you almost felt bad leaving them behind, even though they knew that was the mission and that they had to be in some of the most treacherous places in the world and be, as well equipped as they could be, but still, barely any sleep, sitting there watching, guard all night long. Definitely in Al-Qaeda Taliban country. And yet very proud to do it. And just, I remember all of us just declare that, we're all going to get out of their lives.
Now, you've been to so many dangerous places and many war zones. What do you think is the most frightening and intense experience you've ever had out in the field?
You mean other than being on a chopper sitting next to big stuff, thinking the chopper's going to crash because big stuff, they just have to lead it? You mean?
Yeah.
I think, in all seriousness, I will say, going another day that I was there in Afghanistan, I went with the National Guard from Alaska, and these guys are patrolling outside the wire also of Bagram, but these guys, we went on the ground. And we actually drove 4 hours, and we ended up at a place where we could clearly see Tora Bora on the horizon. And that's, of course, the famous place where we believe that Bin Laden was and slipped out and, got away from the U.S. military. And that was a pretty frightening sight because you were in the middle of this little tiny, Afghan security post, which at this point these are the friendly Afghan guys, but you just never know. And all they kept talking about on the drive was, if we see a vehicle block the roadway suddenly, we're going. And if we see somebody jump in front of our vehicle, we've got to keep going. We've got to drive over them. We've got to hit that vehicle. We cannot stop because it could be a booby trap for us. The locals know the rules, and if we see somebody that tries to break the rules, and they gave us, obviously lots of flak jackets, helmets, and everything. And that was a pretty scary, just tenuous. And say another time I was in Kosovo, and I was there right after the PCO signed, and that was a very scary situation because it's always very dangerous to be there at any time in the war zone, but particularly towards the end because we're getting their sort of quote last lick. And the Serbs were, being pushed out. The Albanians were coming in. The Serbs were torching everybody's homes, killing people on the way out. The Albanians were, obviously angry at what the Serbs had done to them. There's so much, bad blood between, both of those people. And there's just a ton of monstrosities and atrocities that we would see and hear about when we came into Kosovo. And that was a very, very scary time. And anytime you're in a place, there's nobody basically around. There's very little military presence. You're speaking a foreign language. You have to trust the people you have. You have these fixers. But it's also a very dangerous situation too. The ABC fixers were killed the other day, as we heard about in Iraq. Because you really rely on these local people to help you and guide you and maybe know the terrain and know the back roads. But you just don't know at any turn, when you turn the back road that you may not be ambushed.
Well, you really are going out there and taking chances when you do stories like this. When you were going to college, did you ever think, one day I'm going to be in the middle of a war zone? Or did you actually hope?
You know what? I think I'm a sadomasochist, but I always wanted to do foreign movies. Of course, you always say that there's not going to be a war zone to go to. First and foremost, I'm an American, and I'd love to see that we have peace in the world everywhere. And that there would be, those situations where we need to be. But I think as a journalist, whenever there is some story breaking that's important and that's shaping our world, I think you do want to be there and you want to be able to cover it. And I think you also owe it to your viewers too. I think it gives you a whole different perspective when you're talking about a place and you can say, well, I remember, now if there's everything in Kosovo or places in the Middle East and a number of spots that I've traveled over the years in many countries and many states all over the U.S., I think it really does give you a different perspective and also a different appreciation for the story too.
Now, why do you feel, as such an accomplished journalist, why do you feel wrestling has been treated like that, sideshow parking lot carnival by the media? Why do they have such disrespect?
Yeah, I think because some of the media, maybe they haven't had the experience that I have. I think a lot of people in the media, and in the mainstream media, I do believe they would have a different impression of a lot of folks in the WWE and wrestling in general, if they got the perspective and the vantage point that I had. I really do believe that, because I came in, thinking, this will be kind of fun, and how am I going to try to do stories that are serious, and how am I going to do something? But I thought, okay, I'll find a way to make it happen, and I'm hearing good things about it, so I kind of went in with, hearing good recommendations and interesting, and I had a chance to talk to some of the guys before the trip, and also some of the managers, and so I had a bit of a sense of sort of what's ahead, but I still came in very skeptical, thinking, how am I going to do true, really interesting, powerful stories? And the minute I saw these guys with members of the military, even at the U.S. base and before we took off, and just saw them interacting, and just saw the genuineness of their caring for the military, and this was, look, this is right before Christmas. These guys are busy. They don't get paid extra money, is my impression whatsoever, for doing this trip. They volunteer. And to be able to say, look, I want to get no sleep for, a week and a half. I want to travel to one of the most dangerous places in the world. And I'm just doing it out of, because I love this country and love the men and women who are serving in it. I had so much appreciation, and I could tell it wasn't an act. And I also got a chance to sort of see them working out and training, and I think a lot of people, not just in the media, but I think a lot of Americans, who aren't as familiar with WWE, I think a lot of them think, okay, well, it's all fake, it's all this. I mean, obviously, a lot of things are staged. There's a storyline, there's these fun, sort of, clever stories behind a lot of it. But I think they sort of assume the whole thing is. And I don't think that they realize, just the amount of athletic ability that men and women involved have to have. I mean, these guys are in amazing shape, and I would see them waking up at, 4 or 5 in the morning. We had to wake up super early to do my shows because the time difference, you can imagine, and I'm on live. So none of them complained. They were all, some of them were working out in between, before they were performing there. And I think I also just got a sense that these guys are not, clowns. These guys are true people who really, love the sport. A lot of them have athletic backgrounds. You have to be in amazing shape to do it, especially, taking the bumps and the bruises and the flips and everything else. But separately, they really were great human beings. I mean, I just was so inspired, and just hearing their stories. I mean, it was not, these guys really were excited to be there and couldn't wait to go and see these soldiers. And I mean, I was in a room. I remember seeing Triple H. I could see tears rolling down his eyes when we went into a room in Landstuhl from a guy who had just been in, I believe it was an ambush or a mine. I think it was an ambush that had just taken place in Iraq, and he lost, I think 6 or 7 of his fellow buddies who were out there on the front lines. And here's this young guy in his teens serving our country. I think he had lost at least a leg, and there was no way that hearing his story, talking about it, that you couldn't be affected, and you could just see the genuineness in Triple H's, eyes as he was hearing the story and giving the guy a big hug and signing autographs for him, and Vince McMahon, he just said, look, these are the kind of people that I want working for me. I don't want to just have people who are just good show people. I want to have people who also really care. You could tell that he truly has a commitment to the U.S. military. That it wasn't just, a show just to say he's doing it. It was something that he considered, a commitment and a personal commitment.
On a lighter note, I'm going to say to you, Ric Flair road stories and plane rides.
Oh, I will tell you that I think there's the famous woo, pretty quickly as soon as I met Ric Flair. And he definitely loves, charming young blonde women, that's for sure. But he was a character. Ric Flair definitely held his own on the flight, and he held himself, in the ring. I mean, he could certainly hold his own in the ring too. It was very funny, and here are these guys who are, half his age out there. And as soon as he took up on the flight, he came over yapping to me, he was talking to some of the other guys. One of the things that I learned, following these guys, is there's definitely sort of a hierarchy in the WWE. And the younger guys, you can tell, have such an admiration. I mean, when Ric Flair walked by, and obviously Vince McMahon, the same thing, but when you see these guys who have had so many years in the ring, and have been at it for so many years, and they would just walk by on the plane. You could see them walking by. It was like, you could tell it was like, Elvis was walking by or God was walking by. And there was just such a tremendous admiration for Ric Flair. You could tell everything. And even though, on the other hand, they'd also play little jokes on him, and then he could also, he wasn't like so untouchable that they couldn't have a good time with him. He certainly was a good guy. But as soon as the plane took off, there's a little cheering, a little toasting, but a lot of talking. And there's a lot of talking about what's ahead, What do you think Afghanistan's going to be like? What do you think this is going to be like? What do you think this is going to be like? A lot of the guys had obviously never been in Afghanistan before. I think JBL had been there before, but he was one of the few who actually had been in Afghanistan and had gone on some other trips. And so a lot of them were sort of picking his brain, and just asking about, and asking a lot about, hey, well, what do you think you'll get out of the trip, and what can we do for you, and blah, 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 blah. And, it was funny at first, it was Miss Cosby. But it was definitely Rita, I think, after like an hour in the flight. It was definitely, I think we all became very fast friends,
Did Rick ask you about Space Mountain?
Yes, he did. He asked me if I wanted to go to Space Mountain, and I was very familiar with the phrase.
Oh boy!
I told him I was going to go to the Bagram Mountains instead, But he was definitely a character. He was very funny and sending me little cute notes back and forth on the plane, and just was very playful, and very capricious. And it was funny. All the guys, well, I'm just going, don't worry about him, And then on the other hand, it was also like, isn't that guy amazing? Look at him, he's still alive. He's been in the ring for XX, and he's been doing that. And you could tell that he was, a little kid at heart. And then, and for me, I didn't know a lot about a lot of these guys. I'd done some research like a journalist would do on, who are the characters who are coming with me.
Right.
But it was really interesting to sit there and talk to, folks like John Cena, and who loves his military and talked a lot about that. And Mick Foley, who was along for the trip, and he's really big into veterans affairs. And he was just telling me about all the injuries he had. I remember hearing about it. I said, what kind of? I remember saying to him, I think after I met him for a few minutes, okay, tell me a little bit about. If he's had any injuries in the ring. I didn't know the whole details, and when I heard his list, I think it took I was probably about an hour of the flight to hear about his injuries.
When he got to the part about his ear being ripped off.
There's a diagram, right, in one of his books, I think he was telling you. There's a diagram in one of his books, detailing his some of his injuries. And the fact, after he told me, I'm thinking, how is this guy walking?
Yeah, everybody wonders how Mick Foley's still walking. Jim, do you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, did your respect for these guys lead to you doing the story that you did, and I hate to be a downer, about when Eddie Guerrero passed on? Was that the respect that you had for these individuals? Is that kind of why you wanted to dedicate a portion of your live show that's on a primetime network, that's on a major news network, to pro wrestling?
Well, you know what? I did actually have the interview with Eddie before I went on the trip, but I had a chance to talk with a number of them beforehand. So I did have, I think getting the respect that I had, that I felt that I was getting, and also that I felt I was certainly receiving from these guys. And hearing their stories, just on the phone, when I knew that we were heading off, in a week or two or three, I think, after that. And then when I heard about this, the passing of Eddie Guerrero, I said, well, that's something I travel on. This is a good way to introduce to people. So it's not all of a sudden, okay, well, Rita's all of a sudden in Afghanistan with the WWE. And then I started looking up online and hearing all these stories about, that Eddie, and I had met Eddie Guerrero. Myself, and I told you I'd gone to that wrestling match where JBL and The Undertaker were up against each other, and Meredith, who was JBL's wife, and I were friends when I worked at Fox News. So she'd asked me if I wanted to come, and I remember meeting Eddie Guerrero, and just being so impressed with him. And, here I remember, it was my first experience here. They're, beating the heck out of themselves, to each other in the ring. And then I go backstage, and I had a chance, obviously, to meet JBL, but I certainly had a chance to meet Eddie Guerrero. And I remember coming over and saying, I really enjoy your work in the Middle East. It's really wonderful. It's so funny for me. Here's this guy, just came off, this massive wrestling match, and here he's talking like he's a scholar. But I thought it was very funny, and he and I actually had a chance to talk quite a bit. So then when I heard about his passing shortly after that, and I knew I was heading to Afghanistan, I actually said, we should do something on this. And I will tell you, we had so many people tune in. I remember the ratings that night. We always get our ratings, and especially in the cable world, everybody sort of lives and dies by ratings. Right. And I remember looking at the numbers, and they were astronomical. And they also promoted it. I remember also at, on WWE, they said if you tune in, I think it was a day or two in advance, tune in and we'll be doing something. We had Chavo on, and we had a number of other people on talking about Eddie JBL, I believe, as well.
Yes.
And we had such a huge following. And that also just reinforced to me that, that and it wasn't just people. What I was looking for is, hey, they're all only just wrestling fans who are sending us emails and tuning in. And I was reading some of the emails that were just from viewers, and it was, mom and pop and, Iowa sending those, and it was, somebody in, Minnesota sending those, and and these were folks who would say, I'm not necessarily just a wrestling fan, but I really like these guys, and you put a different perspective about them. I now have a different opinion, and that was really interesting. You need to hear about their lives, and I think some people, because they haven't had the exposure to seeing the other layers to them and seeing the sort of human side to them, they see sort of the show side, but they haven't seen, all the human beings and the real life experiences that some of these guys had. And I try to sort of touch on it from a news perspective. Obviously, we showed some great footage of Eddie in the ring and some of his, great matches and things like that, but we also saw him as a human being and what the loss meant to the business from a business perspective. And I just was done. And when I saw those emails, it just reinforced to me that there's a huge audience out there and people are just fascinated with wrestling. And I think the people got to see some of the other layers that I was, fortunate enough to see. I think they'd have a greater appreciation for WWE and for wrestling in general.
I think we all really gained appreciation, and I'm not sucking up here, but for your work, because we've seen a lot of wrestlers pass on in the past 5 years. I mean, there's a veritable who's who of the legends of wrestling who just dropped in their mid-40s just because of all the substances or what have you that they've done to themselves over the years. And I mean, Eddie wasn't even in his 40s yet, and he passed on. And I mean, I think we all kind of were hoping that somebody would actually step up and actually cover it, because a lot of times these guys die, and the only place you hear about it is on sites like ours. And I think seeing it on MSNBC, the way that it was covered, we were all kind of like, this is pretty cool, because, I mean, yeah, it's sad because Eddie passed on, but somebody's actually giving it a little bit of respect, and we really do appreciate that you went out of your way to do that for us.
No, and I think I also had a personal touch, and I really appreciate you saying that too, because for me it was an easy decision, having met him. And I also thought, let's see what people think about this. Let's see, again, if this appeals to even a very wide audience. And I was really pleasantly surprised, and I think people are always fascinated, with sort of the other side of these people. That's why I think people love celebrities too. They'll see a celebrity out there and we're always curious, okay, well, what do they do off hours? What do they really like? See what they are like on this TV show or this show, and same thing with wrestling. We see them perform. Everybody knows, the storylines, and there's the great writing and sort of creative fun things that go behind it, and all the clever things. And they know it's obviously a big part of it is show. So them really get to know what these people are like off there. And I think the example now is Hulk Hogan, who it's a reality show. And I think that's why people have been enjoying watching that show and seeing what he's like with his family. What is this guy really like? What does he do? What is he? But we got so many. Even after I went over to Afghanistan too, I got so many notes and so many letters. And to this day, I remember I got off the plane just a few days ago. And one of the baggage guys was grabbing my bags, and here I was, I think I was in California at the time, and he said to me, "Thank you so much for what you did for Eddie Guerrero." And I remember, Stuart had said the same thing to me earlier in the day. So I still have so many people, and it just reminded me of just what a huge, huge audience it is. And I hope that mainstream America gets to see some of the sides that I was able to see, and I hope they got to see my reports to be able to see that these guys they're not just great athletes, but again, great human beings, and just a lot of fun too. I mean, it was really one of the most interesting, fun, different experiences. And if I had gone with the U.S. military, that would have been obviously a blessing in itself. But to go with guys who were so into it and so dedicated, and were able to put such a big smile on the face of these, young men and women who were out there, working tirelessly. It was really inspiring. You could just tell that when we left Bagram, I talked about when we left the forward operating base, but when we left Bagram in general and finally left Afghanistan, we were all pretty quiet on that flight back, because we were just thinking, you know what, these guys are heading into Christmas, they're going to be away from the family, we're probably the last visitors they're going to have for a long time. And literally the men were just, men and the women on the base, they were crying, just saying, thank you for coming. I don't think there was a wet eye, on the plane on the way back, when you thought about those faces.
I just recently got to speak with a gentleman who had just gotten out of the military, and he was actually one of the people who led to the capture of Saddam Hussein.
Wow.
His medic unit had taken some insurgents who had gotten injured by U.S. soldiers, taken them into the tent, started working on them. Their families came in and saw that they were receiving such great care from the U.S. people, and they knew they would get it from the people of the Hussein regime, that they gave up where Hussein was. And as I was talking to this gentleman and just listening to him telling me the whole story, it was just amazing how that whole thing transpired, and that led him to ask me, "Where do you get your news from?" I said, "Well, I watch."
And what did you say?
I said, "Well, I watch MSNBC." I said, and then I watch Fox News. I said, but I primarily I like to go to military.com and the U.S. Defense website. He said, "Good." He said, "Don't listen to what they have to say on TV." Do you agree with that? With most media outlets, do you think they slant it to the point that it's almost like the people of Iraq don't want the U.S. there? How do you feel about that?
You know what? And it's funny. I have mixed feelings. Someone asked me the other day, like, is the media only covering the bad stuff? Are we changing it? Are we? And I mean, I do think most people in the press, I really will defend them in the sense that I do feel that they're there to try to paint an accurate picture, to try to do the right thing. And I do think that there are obviously a lot of difficult things that are happening over in Iraq right now, and I don't think we should sugarcoat it and pretend that there are not difficult things happening. On the other hand, I do think that I would love to see more stories sort of about, these great men and women that are over there in Iraq, and profiling, and maybe some more positive stories. And even if maybe the situation itself is not as positive, there's still some great stories with those guys who are fighting on the front line. And I would love to see some of those stories that are inspiring to Americans who say, God, thank goodness I'm an American. Look, I can, this man is over there and he's fighting for our freedom. He's doing it again. He has to do some more tours of duty. This is what his life is like over there. I think that's the one thing that we are missing. And I do think sometimes we do, obviously cover the bad because it makes the headlines. Sometimes it doesn't make the headlines. So I do think we are guilty of that to some degree. I also think sometimes we only hear about the bad too. I mean, a lot of times we don't hear about the good sometimes. I remember a number of times where I was covering a variety of stories, and people would say, "You didn't cover blank, blank, blank," and I would look at them going, "What? No one ever told us that." So I think some of the responsibility also of the military and others is to make sure that we get some of the good news out and that we do highlight some of the accomplishments. And I am concerned, I will tell you, about the morale of the military over there when they do hear some of these negative stories. I wonder sometimes, how difficult it is for our men and women. Here they are, doing everything they can, right there on the front lines and dealing with an already very difficult situation. Then to hear, the American press, covering a tough story. What I'm more concerned about than is when I hear sometimes politicians saying, why are we over there? Why are we doing this? And I'm not saying I'm not going to take a position one way or other whether we should be there or not. That's obviously up for the American public, not myself. But what I do think is really bad is I think we can never lose sight that we have to continue to support our men and women over there, make them feel that their mission, is being recognized and appreciated. And I think if there is a criticism of whether we should be over there or not, in the same breath, we have to still always say, thank God for our American men and women over there. And I think sometimes we forget to do that. And I don't know sometimes how they keep up their spirits over there, knowing that the American public is divided and not always giving them, I think, the compliments that they deserve.
Right. And I get a lot of calls from servicemen overseas, and one of them was in, I believe, Afghanistan. And I mean, the connection was really bad. You couldn't really hear what he was saying. You heard like Arab music in the background, but he said he was a serviceman. And all I said back to him was, "Thank you for your service." And it's like a bomb hit him because like an emotions came out. He's like, "It's not right what they're doing over there about the media. They don't know what we're doing." I mean, I was like, "You've got the right guy to tell this to."
I do, and I think that's the right point, though. I do think that the media could do a better job of covering some of the really good stories over there and some of the accomplishments. I think also you can also be PR weapons for whoever it is. I always tell people, like, I'm sorry if you didn't like the story I did, but this was the fact. My job is not to do, PR spin, for one side or the other, but it is also, to also report both both situations fairly, and I do think we could do a better job of covering some of the good, and all again, as much as we can to honor our men and women over there and do some really great profiles of them. And also, I come from, my father was a POW in World War II. My father was Polish, and was part of the Polish resistance. My father was captured by the Nazis and then put a role in an escape, and was ultimately saved by U.S. forces. So you're talking to a daughter of a POW and someone who really appreciates what the men and women of the U.S. military do, because I wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case.
Now, you're in the middle of a career change right now. So
yeah, I decided I'm gonna do the WWE, and
you're gonna manage JBL.
You're gonna be in a steel cage match this weekend for the women's championship.
I'm going to go up against big stuff, and I'll do announcing with Vince McMahon and offer to cut my hair. No.
Why did you leave MSNBC?
Well, I actually I was in talks with them for a while about it, and I wanted to do some different things, and this was just a really good time in my life to do it. And I'm very thankful for the time that I had at MSNBC. I loved it. As we talked about what happened here in Afghanistan, I got to cover so many great stories with them. And they had canceled my regular live show because there's no more tape programming. Unfortunately, that's part of what's happening in the news business in general, if you look at it, that they're not doing as much traveling, they're not doing as much of a number of other things I love doing. The stories in Afghanistan is a great example. And I thought this is a great time in my life to do some other things. I'm in the midst of a very neat, special project that I've always sort of dreamed about doing right now, which I can't talk about more than that, and which you'll hear about, I'm sure, in a few months from now. And I've already had a whole bunch of other opportunities that I'm purposely sort of holding off because I'm doing a neat thing in the middle, in the meantime, that I've always sort of wanted to do. But I'm very, very thankful to MSNBC and NBC. I had such a great time. I made some great friends there. And when you cover stories like you do in Afghanistan and elsewhere, you don't just work with people, you become really good friends with them, and you're with them 24 hours a day. And I got to cover a lot of incredible stories. I mean, I went to Hurricane Katrina and went down to the Mexican border and, then in Afghanistan and, interviewed Vicente Fox in Mexico and did so many great things. So I do feel very, very fortunate. And I tell everyone there's a lot more to come, and you'll hear about it in the next few months.
Where do you get your news from, Rita?
I get it from you guys, and then I call Ric Flair and ask him for updates every day. I know. I get it from everywhere. I'm a voracious news hound. When I was growing up, my parents would always say to me, you're either going to be a news person or you're going to be a prosecutor. You're going to be, I was one of those people who always used to fight for the little guy. What I always felt was right, I would always pick up and fight for. But I always loved covering the news, and I wouldn't tell my bosses that I do it for free just because I'm so fascinated with the world. Both of my parents are European, so I grew up knowing the world was a lot bigger than my little place in the United States. And I've always been fascinated with, with international news and domestic news. But I get it from everywhere. I read several newspapers a day. I'm constantly watching the cable channels and also, the evening news. I'm also flipping around and watching, NBC Nightly News and ABC. I'm watching Katie Couric from time to time. So I'm flipping around all over the place. And listening to radio, but I'm a news hound. Even now, even though I'm working on a whole bunch of stuff, and not on every day, I'm still watching and still doing stuff sometimes. Once you're a news addict and a journalist, it's in your blood. You can't get away from it.
Who did you look up to going into the field of journalism?
There's so many people that I admire. I mean, I love Martin Wallace. I think he's an incredible journalist and dogged in his, pursuit for getting an answer, and I love his style. I think Diane Sawyer is fantastic. I mean, what she's accomplished in her lifetime with 60 Minutes and One America, and just recently some of her trips, to Iran and Syria and all over the place that she's been. And I also, Barbara Walters, I think, is a woman. I have so much admiration for her, just what she went through, and as a woman just sort of breaking all the days. Even when I started, there were not that many people in sort of key women, key roles, I would say. I've been on air and television now for 17, 18 years. And, in the local markets, there's always been women, but on the network level, it's really, it's been, in the last, number of years where we've really seen them taking a prominence, including, Katie Couric, you see, Diane Sawyer is such a force, Barbara Walters is such a force. But I have, and I, and I love, I've also admired great print reporters, of course, when I look back to some of the war correspondents, some of the folks who used to cover, Vietnam, and just hearing some of the experiences they had. I was at a luncheon actually the other day where Steve Cross was on it, and I didn't realize he actually was in the military in Vietnam. He was a public affairs officer, and then he was working with some of the, different journalists there, and that's when he got introduced to journalism. And some of those guys, I think, are just, it's incredible to hear. I always have such admiration for these journalists who not only do the great investigative work in the digging and uncovering, because I know how much work that is, but also how rewarding it is. But I also admire those folks who are on the front lines. There's some great journalists right over there now who are in Iraq, have been there for, the last year or two, and the fact that they're still there and loving their job every day is very admirable.
Well, we're closing up here in just a few minutes, but I wanted to ask you, from my personal experience doing a radio show on AM radio and doing this show for as long as I have and shows like this, I've noticed that there's a line of political correctness we all have to walk, and if you venture off it, you can get chewed up and spit out pretty easily. From having a live show like you had where anything could slip out, anything could be said, and all that, how nerve-wracking was it, and what is your opinion when you see things like Don Imus and so forth just getting completely chewed up for whatever they said?
Yeah, I was asked so much about Don Imus because I had just left MSNBC, and I was on the Don show a number of times. First to the Imus situation, I felt it was important. I think it's important to have a standard of protocol and obviously be respectful to people. I think you can still be clever but be respectful, and I think obviously his comments were more inappropriate, especially as a woman, not just listening, but also as a woman hearing his comments. On the other hand, I don't think also, Don should be singled out for what he said, because I do think there were things he said well before that were probably just as outrageous, and I think there are people out there who've made much more outrageous comments than he did. I think, it's because of all of the comments that came from Al Sharpton and some of the others, and all the attention that came from the advertisers, pulling out and all that stuff, that combination of things. So I think in many ways it is the right thing for him to get totally singled out if you look at what's happening, I think. And then secondly, as a live show, there is a risk, of course, when you're doing a live show. And you think about, again, with Don Imus, all the hours of programming he's done and all the crazy things he said, and, there's always that risk that something's going to slip out, or someone, you might have a guest on who, obviously you do as much vetting as you can, and you can hope that it's a really good pre-screening of that guest. But sometimes, I used to have some pretty contentious debates on my show, and you don't know what people are going to say if somebody's so mad at so-and-so or something, and it might be great TV, but you just have to go, wait a minute. I think but I also think it's invigorating as a journalist to be in a live situation, because two things you can do. I mean, one thing you can do, and I did this one time where I said to the guy, okay, I'm going to shut your mic off, if you don't get this person to say, I'm going to shut your mic off, and you have to be, you say moderator. And that's where I think journalists do have to be responsible and make sure that if there is anything inappropriate said, however it is, that they challenge, that you put it in perspective that that's that person's opinion, but there's other opinions out there. It's also very fun. I think, cable television is so much fun because of the unpredictability. And also, when there's a great news story that's out there, there's nothing like cable news to be able to cover it, because it's wall-to-wall programming, and you can really develop the story and give enough time to a story and flesh it out. So I think the pluses outweigh the minuses.
All right, Rita, real quick, I love these. These are the rapid-fire either-or questions to end the interview with. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Okay. Is this a choice A or B?
Yes, this is an either-or. Three of them, real fast. First one, as a New Yorker, Mets or Yankees?
Oh, you know what? That's hard. It's got to be both. And I'm telling you, I love both. And I'm not just being politically correct. I'm a baseball fan, period. I love both. And I've been to, the games with both recently. Fantastic.
Better on-air talent, Bill O'Reilly or Keith Olbermann?
Oh, that's a hard one. You know what? I've known Bill a lot longer than I've known Keith. Both very clever. Bill has a huge on. If you look at the ratings, Bill's numbers are enormous, and they're both obviously very talented.
And last but not least, Hulk Hogan or Ric Flair?
Oh, but you know what? Both equally blonde and both equally charming. I would tell you, Rick, when he did his, his crew, that is still very charming. But Hulk Hogan gave me a big hug and kiss personally. So, I don't know. I say they both give each other a run for their money.
Two blonde, charming men being talked about by a very blonde and very charming woman. Thank you so much, Rita Cosby, for being on the show. We appreciate having you on at Our Slam Wrestling.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and I'm going to continue being a fan of the WWE and you guys too. Thanks so much.
Outstanding. Thank you very much, Rita. Have a great day.
All right, Rita, before we let you go, can we ask for one little favor from you?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much. That was awesome. We really do appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome. It was really fun.
That was cool. Seriously, I really enjoyed that one a lot.
Oh, it was really fun. Very, very fun. You guys are great. Now, have you guys ever had a chance to monitor, sort of how big the audience is at all? Have you had a chance?
It kind of goes in ways, and then this is going to sound kind of rude, but it kind of goes in ways, and I'm sure you're used to it, kind of by the size of who's on the show that day. Like, when we had Hulk Hogan on, the site crashed because there were so many people listening to it.
Oh, my God, that's hilarious.
Yeah, it was insane. It got so big where I had to actually start telling some other sites that were promoting it, could you take it down because my bandwidth is costing me a lot of money.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
do you know how many hits that was to crash it?
Oh gosh, it's not so much the hits, it's the bandwidth, how many bandwidth it was, and I think at that point we had something like the audio file was about 20 megs, something like that, and it turned out that I don't know if you know computer terms, but it turned out that we ended up crashing 400 gigs of transfer.
Oh my God, that's great. Oh, that's great. Congratulations.
Yeah, that was one of
the site backed up for this one, don't we, Jim?
Well, yeah, we have it. Yeah, reinforcements. Yeah.
Good.
So the last favor the favor I wanted to ask you for is, would you mind giving us a station identification, basically saying this is Rita Cosby?
For sure. What would you like me to say?
How about this is Rita Cosby and you're getting hit with the Hour Slam.
Actually, I'm sorry, you guys are breaking it. This is Rita Cosby and
you're getting hit with the Hour Slam.
You're getting hit with the Hour Slam. You got it.
All right, cool.
Alrighty, well, ready to record in 5, 4, 3, 2.
And this is journalist Rita Cosby, and you're getting hit with the Hour Slam.
My name is James Walsh, and I'd like to thank you for checking out the Wrestling Epicenter here on YouTube. If you have not done so already, please do. Click that subscription button and the notifications bell. This way you'll be notified anytime I upload any new or new to you classic content from our archives that date back to 2002. If you get the opportunity, please also check out www.wrestlingepicenter.com for all your wrestling news and info needs, as well as our store to keep us going free and clear. Without any further delay, let's get to why you came here, the content here on YouTube.